Okay, so here's what we're going to discuss. Rambam's conception of redemption / Mashiach. Basically, what do we want to figure out? My question that I'm starting with is, since this is a Moira series, or it's supposed to be a Moira series, so the topic I selected, knowing that I'm not sure where I'm going to find it in the Moira, was the topic of Gula, Mashiach. So you look around the Moira, and you'll find a little bit here, a little bit there. The word Mashiach appears, I think, 4 times in the Bible, so maybe more. The notion of redemption, you have a couple of places. I showed you in the Bar Kochba, Beis Chof Tes, Gimel Yud Aleph. Much more significantly, I think, is an Aleph Lamed, although there is much more cryptic. It's not explicitly about redemption as such. But, so more than it's there, you notice that's not there. And like I was looking in the index of this edition, and they don't even have an entry for Mashiach. Schwartz does, so he showed me 2 or 3 places where the word Mashiach appears. They don't have an entry for Geula. So I think that is very striking, the absence of a discussion of redemption in the Bible. In other words, what is going to happen? How is something going to happen? What's going to happen that hasn't happened till now? That's going to facilitate or bring in this era of blessedness and perfection. Why do I think the Meir should talk about it? Because the Rambam counts it as one of the Ikrim. And here's this handy little chart, of which I am very proud. Here, you can pass it around. This is, oh, you have your Kisvei one. Okay, good. So take a look at this chart here, which is...
You shared it on the chat.
Oh, okay. Right.
And I think Yaakov already pointed out then that 13 isn't in it at all.
Correct. So 13, which is... Okay, so let me just say what the chat is for the record here, what the chart is. The chart tracks the 13 principles of faith and where they occur in the mind of Hashem. And you'll notice that it sort of tracks, even in terms of the order. The beginning of the mind of Hashem was about the more fundamental ikrim, and then fundamentals, the way the Rambam structures them. And then further in the Meir, you get to the later ikrim. So unsurprisingly, the 13th ikr, Chasam Sofer, does not appear in the Meir, unsurprisingly because the Rambam never talks about it. Now, parenthetically, it does appear twice in the Meir. The mention of Chasam Sofer appears twice in the Meir. One is where the Rambam quotes the Gemara that Eve was cut from Chasam Sofer, and one is where he's talking about the various heavens, and he says, Arav, the Gemara in Chagiga says that in the heaven called Aravis, there's the Tal that Hashem is going to use to resurrect the dead. And he says, and you know that this Tal is not Kipshutai. So don't think it means what it sounds like. So the 2 places in the Meir where he says it are about some sort of undermining of Kipshutai. Okay, so that's not surprising given the Rambam's whole reticence regarding Chasam Sofer. He doesn't want to talk about it, whatever the reason is, fine. Ayin Igeres Chasam Sofer, Maimed Chasam Sofer. But he clearly says, I have nothing to say about it, I don't want to talk about it, I can't talk about it. He says that. That's a whole parsha to itself. But why isn't the 12th ikr explored? That's my question. Obviously, I mean, you could question this Hanach of the question. I'm sort of looking at it like the Meir is supposed to be about the essence of Judaism. The essence of Judaism is these 12 things. The 13th one is there also, but it's not working. Okay. But reluctantly, so why isn't it there? That's the question. Okay, wait, we have to pause for a second. you take this as a sign from Shemayim?
Complicates. It's a problem.
I don't know if we're recording or not. Yeah, it looks like we are. Okay, good. Okay, so that's the question. Why isn't it in the mirror? Now, given that it's an Iker, so we have to first understand why it's an Iker. Yeah, Chasam Sofer. There's a Chasam Sofer which he argues on the Rambam that counts it as an Iker. This is in the last Tshuva. He says a remarkable statement. Last Tshuva in Yeridea. He says, it's impossible for me in any way to believe that our redemption is one of the fundamentals of faith. Such that if you don't have that foundation, there wouldn't be anything built on it. As Rabbi Akiva holds about the says Shvatim that are rejected forever. Hashem le'echol prioritas b'getuva, lasas etzaincha l'kai chuflatzti. V'akapon v'akaloifin avdi Hashem anachnu, ya'aseh imonu k'etzayin b'cheftzoi, ve'en ze ikar v'lo yisoy limnas alav shom binyan. Amazing thing.
Can you have a word that says, doesn't it say Chasam
Chasam, yeah.
Oh, so this is
Mashiach.
Excuse me.
Mashiach. And his argument is like this: like, what makes it an ikr? That if you don't have this, if this is not true, then there's no rest of religion. So he says, well, let's say Hashem would not redeem us. Let's say we would sin so that He wouldn't redeem us. Like Rabbi Akiva holds about this as struggle. Would that mean we don't have to keep the Torah? We don't keep the Torah for the reward. We keep the Torah because we have to.
So there's ways you have the same question also.
On what?
You don't need it to kind of Torah.
Right. Yeah. So it's very odd because, first of all, the way he's setting it up doesn't seem correct. Because if you believe it's going to happen, he says he believes it's going to happen because the Nevi'im says it's going to happen. It's not that he's questioning whether it's going to happen. The Nevi'im, he says, but Lamais, you have to believe in the Nevi'im, and the Nevi'im says it's going to happen, so he believes it. But it's not an ikr. It's not an ikr such that the Torah is not based on it. Because even if Hashem wouldn't redeem us, it would still be a Torah. But that's not. But Hashem will redeem us. So that's non-existent universe. So what the Rambam is saying, in other words, what the Rambam is saying is that it is fundamental to the Torah as such. That is redemption. It will be redemption. The Chasam Sofer's thought experiment about a Torah that doesn't have redemption is not about what if something would happen that there would be redemption. That's not going to happen. It's about what if there would be a different world or a different Torah that doesn't contain in it this notion of redemption. Still, there would be the rest of the Torah. How's he supposed to know that? That's how he's supposed to know that. His thought experiment doesn't exist. The 10 tribes, whether they have to keep the halachas or not, if they do, it's only because, and I think it's a big if. I'll tell you why. Because it's an ikra. But if they do, it's because there's still this concept of redemption in the Torah for those who will make it there. Same way someone who, let's say, doesn't think Mashiach's coming in his lifetime has to keep the mitzvahs. Okay, but let's try to bring it out. So why, in fact, does the Rambam consider the redemption as an ikra in the Torah? Mice, just stop. There's some at least pointing us to consider that. Why is it so fundamental?
Are they seeing the function of Torah differently? The Rambam sees it as a means to an end, and the Chasam Sofer sees it as an end in of itself.
Something like that's what it seems, right? In other words, the Rambam, you could say it that way. The Rambam seems to understand that redemption means that the Torah will succeed. The Torah's project for Am Yisrael will eventually succeed. I don't have power either. What's going on here? Where's the power? Oh, can you pass the power cord? Maybe that was the problem. You can get that. Thank you. That's fine. This doesn't matter so much. It's good. As long as it gets there. Okay. Yeah, the Rambam considers the notion of redemption, Mashiach, as being the Torah's project working. As in, and they're gonna have that's Canaan, and they're gonna serve me. And I'm gonna dwell amongst them. And the fact that was temporary and ended up being unstable indicates that the Torah hasn't yet proven successful. So you have to believe that the Torah can succeed. So that's what you're saying, right? Chasam Sofer is saying, well, we do the Torah because we do the Torah. Okay, but if the Torah has some sort of project that involves sovereignty, independence, and all sorts of blessing, and all the Nevi'im never stop talking about that, as the Rambam says in Akdom to Chelik, I think he says all the Nevi'im talk about it. Kol HaNevi'im Moshe Malachi, he talks about it in the Tanakh also. So that means that's what it is about. It is what it's about. I don't begin to understand the Chasam Sofer. It's a very funny question. What if Hashem won't redeem us? Okay, but that's not what this is about. This is about Hashem will redeem us. So, but either way, so the Rambam does consider this to be the like where the Torah is going towards, where everything's going towards. So therefore, what I want to submit, this is going to be my theory that I want to work on, is that the answer to the question of where is this in the Torah is that the whole Torah is preparing for this. Meaning to say, let's say we phrase the question, why didn't the Rambam talk about, if it didn't happen till now, what's going to change? Why will it happen later? Okay, that's like, what does it mean they should talk about it? They should talk about what steps are going to be necessary. Like, you have this ikar, Torah is about this, right? Torah is about this notion that it's possible for things to be perfect. They weren't until now, there were problems. So it's important to explain, this is the premise of my question, he should explain somewhere what change is going to be affected, is going to allow for this blessed era to come into fruition. And the answer I want to submit is that this is the change, this book. Okay, that's why it's not there. Because the whole book is telling you what you need to know to make the Torah succeed. In other words, see, if you reduce the problem of Mashiach to, okay, what was holding back the Torah from succeeding? Then essentially, anyone who writes a Sefer on Torah is bringing us close to Mashiach, right? He's fixing some problems. Especially if he's writing a fundamental Sefer that's fixing a major core tenet that he's trying to change something, his attitude towards things. Then we can say that it's a book to bring in Mashiach. Okay, so what does it say? Does it say something like something with the Sefer Da Yachtum Begalusa or something like that? Anyone know that phrase from the Zohar? Something like that. I think this is with this book. I don't know if it's with this book. Or God of Goals. Yeah, you've heard that. People have told it. So that's my answer. So this is the book to take us out of Golos. So what I'm going to argue is that the Torah hasn't succeeded. Some problem with the Torah. The problem with the Torah means saying something about the Torah that was never done perfectly. And I'm just going to rectify that. And that very thing he's going to rectify is what's necessary for Mashiach. So in other words, just like the Mishneh Torah ends with Yom Mashiach, and we're going to start exploring it tonight. It sort of starts with the problem and ends with it also. So the Torah also is leading towards Yom Mashiach. A, and B, that the key mission of the Torah is described in the introduction, which is you have to understand that Nevuahs are full of Meshalim. The notion of Meshalim is very central to Yom Mashiach, as we mentioned before we started this year, which is that the Rambam in Halacha Bergebe says you should know that about the animals is a mashal, Gozev Kefes is a mashal, and we'll know when Mashiach comes, what the meaning of the Meshalim are. So the notion of Meshalim is very important, very related to Mashiach, and that the notion of Meshalim is very important for getting Malchus right. Specifically getting Malchus right, which in a certain sense what Mashiach is all about, getting Malchus right. Okay, this is what I'm going to be arguing. That the Moreh Nevuchim is all about Yom Mashiach, and he's supplying us with what we need to take the Torah to the next level and unlock its promise, which is Gula, and that is revolves around Mishalim, and specifically kingship, which is Mashiach is about kingship in a way, is also about Mishalim. This is what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is like this. Since let's start with Hilchos Melachim. So here we have a couple of Rambams here. Here's one. This is we're going to be looking at Mada and Tshuva and Melachim. So let's start with Melachim Perek Aleph. Even more than usual, I need to be corrected if I'm crazy, because I've been like in this world for a long time, like by myself. You know what I mean? No, like because we're not learning a text together. Tell me if this is completely okay. I can give you a couple more, please. Sure. Okay, so Hilchos Melachim is 10 prakim about the laws of kings and the wars, and then Hilchos Bnei Noach. And then the last 2 prakim of Hilchos Melachim, which are the last 2 prakim of Mishneh Torah, are about Mashiach. Now, I hope you're somewhat familiar with it, because it would be helpful, but let's read something inside. He starts with HaMelech HaMashiach Osid Lamed. The King Mashiach will eventually rise. Now, right away, you have to think about it. It's a very odd way to start this discussion. Because if he's telling us that there's a notion of Mashiach, there is such a notion, then he should say, one day there will arise a king. HaMelech HaMashiach is referring to it as an existing notion. But isn't he coming to tell us what exists besides if you don't first assert that there's going to be such a king?
Well,
once you say the Messiah, aren't you assuming that he's going to rise?
Is Mashiach given that it's going to come, or it's only if we?
He says, "HaMelech HaMashiach Osid Lamed."
Well, let's say we don't live up to the way to get there.
So either we're guaranteed that we will, or nonetheless.
So then back to the question: why do we need?
Right. That's why the Mechilek the Gemara, whether people will certainly do tshuva or not, whether Mashiach will come without tshuva. So why do we need what?
Oh, so they're saying the.
Why do we need the Meirah? No, one second.
In case you want to get there with the Torah.
Yeah, no, not just that. One second. Back to my first question. We believe that Hashem is one. How do we know that? So the Meirah will tell us why. We believe that Mashiach will come. How? How do we know that? The Meirah should tell us how. That was my question. It's a fundamental part of Judaism, so why doesn't the Meirah justify it? Okay? And that's my question. And then my answer is the Meirah does, because he's actually taking the Torah to the next step. That's my suggested answer. Okay, so how do you start by saying the Melech HaMashiach will rise? I mean, if you won't, then there's no such thing as the Melech HaMashiach. So I think the answer is that we have to think about the fact that Mashiach is at the end of Hilchos Melachim. Hilchos Melachim is about kingship, which kingship was always problematic, always fraught, never quite successful. So when we talk about the Melech HaMashiach, what we mean is the notion that there will be an ideal king that will do what the kings were always expected to do but never quite did. So HaMelech HaMashiach is a way of saying like this: the ideal righteous king, which is conceptually exists, it's actually what we've been trying to get to with the whole Hilchos Melachim. The Torah is clearly trying to find the righteous king, will eventually come. Don't despair from the fact that kingship has never worked. Kings have never worked. And by the way, I don't mean kings as in kings. I mean political order. Forget about kings, We need a king, apparently. Rambam holds the mitzvah to have a king. So let's just say political order, sovereignty, proper governance of the nation of Israel, being a proper nation. That has never worked. Yet we have a concept of it. We have a concept of it, a notion of the perfect king. And here it's saying, okay, that perfect king that you have as a notion, the chiddush is, Osid Lamed, will eventually rise. It will eventually work. Okay? Now, I just want to bring your attention to it. So in other words, this is like the capstone to Hilchos Melachim, because it's telling us that Melachim, the notion of a king, which is a problematic notion historically and, from Sefer Shmuel, and Shmuel is opposed to it. There's some problem with kingship to begin with. And B, kingship was historically a failure, at least we're in exile, minimum, plus we have the history of the kings, not such a rosy history necessarily. So that puts a question mark to the whole notion of malachim as a mitzvah, as Torah desires. Kamash Malan, that righteous king that this is all supposed to be about ostensibly will eventually materialize, even though it hasn't yet.
Is that explicitly a predictive statement, or could it also be a definitional statement?
How so? How definitional? How definitional?
For the Melech Mashiach, or like you're saying, the let's call it the ultimate king. This is what he looks like. He's going to do the following three things.
No, but he doesn't say that. First he says Asad Lamed. That's the first thing. Asad Lamed will rise. So I'm focusing on that. Before he even says what he's going to do, he predicts his arrival, his arising, which I think means his becoming king. The Amad is an interesting expression. I have to think why he used those words.
Yeah, I mean, could he use many other verbs? That's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Limelighter. There's many different verbs that could have.
Yes. And you have to look at the word on Amad. It didn't help me. That's something to think about. Okay, and I want to point out another thing, which we'll get to at some point, hopefully. A very interesting, going back to Parak Aleph, now that we understand that, we're not just studying Mashiach, we're studying the whole parsha of kingship in the Torah, and the redemption of that notion. We need to say that notion can, in fact, have a positive application where it's achieved, where its perfection is achieved. So we have to look at, we have to understand better the problem of kingship in the first place, and that takes us back to Parak Aleph, where the Rambam paskins that it is a mitzvah to establish a king. But take a look at this very odd expression in Parak Aleph Aleph Beis, where after establishing that it's a mitzvah to appoint a king, so he says, "Ma'achash hakamas hamalach mitzvah, lama le'rotza hakadosh baruch hu k'sheshalu melech mishmuel." It's a mitzvah. The answer here is lefi sheshalu b'tar'umis, v'lo yishadu l'kayim hamitzvah. So I want to remember that lashon. They didn't ask what the kind of mitzvah. So what, they're supposed to come like, okay, it's the mitzvah in Torah, make a king. So maybe they want a king? Seriously? First of all, even the Torah itself says you want a king because you want a king. It's not that you want a king because there's a kosuv, shosh mitzvahs of arrest, now that we did that, so we have to make the mitzvah. Could you even be shoyel a king kedei l'kayim a mitzvah? He doesn't say kedei either, but okay, but it means kedei. Could you ask for a king in order to be kind? What does that even mean? You ask for a king because you want a king. There's a real need for it. The reality that there's a need for it, and that's what generates the mitzvah. The Torah says that's what generates the mitzvah. You're going to realize you need a king. So what does Rambam mean that they should have asked the kayim mitzvah? What's that supposed to mean? Okay, so I'm going to keep that in mind. That it seems like the mitzvah as such, as a mitzvah, is somehow the solution to the problem of kingship. Okay? Just putting that out there. All right. Okay, so let's read on in Parak Aleph. So basically we have this problem that starts with kingship. It starts with the first movement towards a king, which was an approach without focusing on the mitzvah aspect or utilizing the mitzvah aspect. But eventually there's going to be proper kingship. He's going to rise. What's he going to do? Okay, he's going to return the Malchus stuff to the way it used to be. He's going to build the Mikdash, Kapsit Yisrael, etc. Fine. If you don't believe in him, or if you don't hope for his arrival, so not only are you crying from the Nevi'im, but you cry from the Torah Moshe Rabbeinu because the Torah is made of him. That Hashem will bring you back to Eretz Yisrael. Now notice what's missing in these psukim from the Torah is any mention of a person. or even of a king. These psukim in the Torah just say Hashem will bring you back to Eretz Yisrael. Nothing about a person. So the Torah is beferish. The Nevi'im are not beferish. The Rambam says in Perikut Beis that we don't know exactly what's going to happen. Perikut Beis Halacha Beis, he says, "Shadvarim stumim heim etzel Nevi'im." What the Nevi'im say about Mashiach is sosum. The Torah says very beferish. That's beferish. What the Torah says beferish is the klal of all the details that were said by the Nevi'im. Af b'parshas Bilum ne'emar b'shom nibo b'shnei HaMashiach. We have to read these words very carefully. This ne'emar b'shom nibo, what this means exactly. B'shom nibo b'shnei HaMashiach. So now we're talking about people, two messiahs. Mashiach HaRishon shu davar she'tzias some datzarim. Mashiach HaAchar shem mibonov. Here we have the Yavoid shemeshiach as Yisrael miyad b'nei Esau. And he goes to the psukim. End of Le'ata is referring to David. Asher of Le'karv is Mashiach. Rabbi Akiva is a kom shevet Yisrael is Mashiach. Does have to come. The come maybe is asking to Amad. Mochatz pasim is David. Kargam Neshes is Mashiach. Mohed Meishes David, etc., etc., etc. Fine.
Do you know if these are dresses from Chazal or this is the Rambam? This
is from Chazal. Yeah, Bilam is from Chazal. And then Halacha Beis he says another proof. And he ends Halacha Beis by saying, all the books talk about this. In the Mishneh says all the Nevi'im talk about this, which is a question because I don't know how Yaina talks about it, but he says all the Nevi'im talk about it. Yaina's other ones that may be questions. But no, it's important to Rambam that this is what all Nevuah is about. If you're a Navi, you're talking about this. Okay, and that's very obvious. Why? Because the Nevi'im are those who talk about Hashem's plan in history. And if this is the combination where it has to be heading to, then naturally they're going to talk about this. Maybe why, if you ever learn Treyasi, you notice that at the end of the Sfarim, a lot of the times they just shifted to talking about the end of days. I think that's what I was getting at. It's something related fundamentally to the Nevuah project of talking about Hashem's plan in history, is to have something to say about this. Okay? He has an expression in Mishneh, it's like Kol HaMikra, Kol Psukim HaMikra about this. Really very strong expressions. Getting back to Chasam Sofer's question. You know what's the impressive Mishneh, please? Going back to why he counts it as an Iker. He sees this all over Tanakh, which it's there. Yeah, Dumbo, before he gets into the Ikrim, he says that Chol Psuke HaMikra Me'idim Al Ashrei Ashrei Nubai on his greatness and our or his success and our success story. Okay, so notice the big difference between the Torah and Bilam. As I mentioned before, the Torah just says Hashem will bring you back to Eretz Yisrael. The Torah doesn't say anything about. The Torah meaning not including Bilam, right? Because Rambam calls it Parshas Bilam. Alpha Parshas Bilam Ne'emar Shom. So there's a Torah Ha'ida Alav Shenemar V'Shavat Hashem L'Kecha Shavoscha, and then there's Alpha Parshas Bilam, right? So the implication of the Rambam is that Parshas Bilam is not included in Torah for his purposes.
It's Gemara. It's much
right.
Exactly.
The Sefer Bilam, right? So this reminds that Gemara. As Moshe wrote the Gemara in Babas, Moshe wrote his book and the book of Bilam. The Rambam is echoing that over here because he says you not only care for B'Shan Nevi'im, you also care for Torah Shabbeinu. Shabbeinu Torah Yidov Shenemar. After Parshas Bilam Nemar. V'Shom Nibo. Who's Nibo? Bilam. So he's not calling on Bilam as being part of the Torah. He's calling on Bilam as being this other parsha called Parshas Bilam and this prophet called Bilam. And it's very important because you see there's this difference between what it says in the Torah and what Bilam says. The Torah just talks about return to Eretz Yisrael. Bilam talks about Agav.
Is this a deviation in your mind or consistency with the rule you said earlier that the topic seems to be almost a part of the Navi project?
The topic of what?
Of redemption.
Ah.
Of Messianism.
On
Is
the
Bilam an exception or is he further?
No, I think it's the same thing. Very consistent with it. Yeah.
He's the rule.
Huh? He's the rule. More than Moshe in a way. I'm saying it's
even though his
more than Moshe, but Bilam wants to talk about Achas Hayomim, right? He's like, well, you're talking about Achas Hayomim. It's a new thing. It's a new,
so it's a symptom of being enough.
Yeah, I think even more than the time. I think so. It has to do with being a Navi. I mean, right, of course, the Rambam says in the Gemara that Moshe is only called a Navi as Shita Hashem. The word Navi doesn't apply to Moshe in the usual sense. Yeah, I think it's right. Like the Rambam end of Halacha is after Divrei HaNeviim, there is using Neviim to mean the other Neviim, not Moshe. Look, yeah, it's a symptom of being a Navi, right? It's not a symptom of Torah, which is bad. It's an ikar about Halacha, about law. Sure not. Even the way that we start, right? Loi b'shav Neviim avad kofer elo b'Torah Moshe. I mean, the ikar place to look for Mashiach is in the Neviim. So he's telling you should know it's in the Torah as well. Okay, why is it so important? Is an interesting question, and why is it important to set it up this way? It's an interesting question. But in a certain sense, there's a prophetic Mashiach and there's a Torah Mashiach, and there's a very, very important difference, which is that let's say I say it like this. Let's say I believe that we're all going to go back to Israel, and we're going to have a democracy, and there's not going to be a king. I'm not kofer b'Torah. I can say I'm not kofer b'Torah. Yeah. Well, if you, maybe the Rambam thinks we need a king to do that. Okay, I don't think we need a king to do that. I think we can figure out a different method of government or whatever. Or I don't think he has to be from David. I don't know. Lots of things I could question, right? Yet the Rambam seems to be putting it together, but there's obviously a very big difference there. And remember too that, as I mentioned before, the Rambam says that what the Nevi'im say is Sasam. And I would say even what Bilam says, by the way, is pretty sus. I mean, the Rambam is saying that Bilam said there's going to be a person, and he makes all these drushes. Okay, is that a person from David? That's Sasam at best, but the Rambam himself says in very good ways. What the Nevi'im say is Sasam. Torah says in Mufurish. Yes, Hashem is going to bring you back there, so. But that it's going to be a leader of special qualities, it's going to be Davidic or like David, that's not Mufurish. It's not even Mufurish. Okay, so fine. Who is this person? Can you tell us anything about this person? Anyone know anything about this person, Mashiach? About his greatness?
Wiser than Shlomo and Moshe.
Yeah, where's that from? You know where that's from?
It's from the Rambam.
From the Chasam. Significant. Now I want to point to, I want to take you to a contradiction between the Chasam Pardes and so let's first go to Chasam Pardes, Halacha Beis. So let's, before we dive into this halacha, let's recap what we have so far. The question is, where is Mashiach Ruchim? Okay, so we have to try to figure out what Mashiach's function is, how it works, and we're noticing that it's end of its malachim, and it's about the perfection of the project of kingship. And so far we noticed that there's two strands, one from Moshe and one from the Nevi'im. Moshe is about to return to Israel, and the Nevi'im, Baruch and Bilam, talk about the person Mashiach. Okay, the person Mashiach. Let's see. Let's meet him in his Tshuva Parak Tes Halacha Beis, and this is in fact where we meet the person Mashiach, and we will only meet him here. We're going to go back to Chas Malachim after we see this halacha. We'll see that this person that we meet in the Tshuva is absent in the Chas Malachim. So Parak Tes Halacha Tshuva is telling us that the rewards in the Torah are not the ultimate purpose, are not the rewards that the Torah talks about as opposed to Al-Haba are not the real rewards of the Torah, like the Rambam is Marich Nakam Tchelik. And even Mashiach is only there as a time that we can perfect ourselves and earn Olam Haba. So I'm reading Halacha Beis. Mepnei zeh is Avu Kol Yisrael, Nevi'im v'Chachamim Listen at Mashiach. Kedei she'enuchu machzor sha'a, she'ena manechzam lasik b'toy mitzvos kahegin. V'yimtzu l'mergoya v'yarbu b'chochma kedei she'yizku l'chayim haba. Lefi, how's that going to happen? She'ba'ois anayom teh b'hadas ha'chachma b'hadas. Shnevikol is de'as Hashem. V'nem alone is Hashem. Mipnei. Okay, so how's that going to happen? So why do we want Yemoshe Mashiach? Because there's going to be a lot of das chachma nevis in those times. Why is there going to be a lot of das chachma nevis in those times? Mipnei. She'ois ha'melech she'yavnu b'zeh David. Bal Chochma Yia Yeser Mishloimai V'Navi Gadol Korov Moshe Rabbeinu. Wiser than Shloimai and a Navi close to Moshe Rabbeinu. Lefikach Yelamed Kolam B'Yeres and Hashem. V'Yavoy Kolagayim Hashem Hashem Hashem. So the Sachakul Kulai is Olam Haba. Amli Moshe Mashiach. So here the Rambam tells us, you know why Moshe Mashiach misses multiple times? Because there's going to be this wonderful teacher, wise and Shlomo, and a prophet close to the status of Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's why we desire Moshe Mashiach, because there's going to be an increase in Das Hashem, and that's how there's going to be an increase in Das Hashem. Now let's look at the last halacha, second to last halacha in Hilchos Malachim, where he also talks about how there's going to be an increase of Das Hashem in the days of Mashiach. And he also talks about what we want it for. Same, it's very, very much parallels that halacha is true. Lo nisabu hachacham v'anavim Moshe Mashiach, lo yikedesh lo yikedesh lo goyim, v'lo yikedesh nasu za'am, lo yikedesh lo z'mayach. Ella, so it's the same thing he says that it's true. Kedesh yu p'nim b'tayim v'chachmasa. That Moshe Mashiach provides an opportunity for Torah and Chachma. V'lo yadam no yigesu mevatel, no stop us. Kedesh yizku l'chayim haba. Commercial ban, no true. But he says, "Man, the Hashem le Rabbi Lecham lekinu masach shachavit mishpas ha'av l'cham daim tzukaf." V'lo yezek kol amol tas Hashem b'vad. V'lo fikach yicham gedel yem b'mastum hamukim. Why? Because it won't be the distractions. V'yasigu das b'nei kvikach adam. No word about them having a teacher wiser than Solomon and the greatest Navi besides formation. It's a contradiction. Both of these halachas, he's telling us what the great desire for Moshe Mashiach is all about. And both of them he says it's a means for Olam Haba. And both of them he says through increase of das and chachma and emes. But he gives different reasons. The Ernest True, he says the reason why the days of Mashiach will lead to an increase of das chachma and emes is because the fisha is a melech sheyam b'zeh David chacham gadol yeyosem shlomo navi karav Moshe Rabbeinu. And here he says that there's going to be an increase in Das Hashem because there's not going to be a negative thing. No one bothering you.
Here he seems to be talking about the and here he seems to be talking about Chachamim specifically.
The Ernest Shuvi says Yisrael. Is that what you mean?
He says the Navi God will carve much when we do Kol Ha'am. They are Oisim Derech Hashem. Whereas here he seems to be talking about Chacham Dafka. It's not Chacham Manavim, right? And he's saying we're going to become Chacham. We could be talking about two different.
Yeah, it's interesting because in Chasam he also starts off and he says Abu Kol Yisrael Nevi'im Chachamim, and of Malachim he talks about when it's Abu Chacham Nevi'im. Right. So you want to suggest that Kol Yisrael are going to
they
need him. Okay. And the Chachamim and the Nevi'im maybe don't need him, they just need people to stop bothering him.
Yeah. Like Ben Zayman says. But I think more about Ben Zayman.
Yeah, what does it say?
I think he says, close to Israel and says, go here for me.
Right.
Is the Rambam talking about the one department where? Yeah, confusing something else.
Done with the Mishnah, he talks about how Kol Olam Nivra only for the
critical elitist Rambam.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting way to think about it. So I want to show another theory here. That in Hilchos Malachim it's fairly explicit. So, okay, now, even before we look at this halacha, I'm going to show you that in Hilchos Malachim it's fairly explicit that Mashiach is not going to be a Navi Gadol, Chacham Gadol Yasem Yishleim and a Navi Karav Moshe Rabbeinu. Firstly, I showed you this halacha, but it's left out. Okay. Secondly, the very fact that if you read through these two prakim, the Rambam doesn't tell us any of these wondrous things about the person Mashiach that he told us that's true. That itself is a problem to me. But more explicitly,
it does talk about this ability that we'll all see MS and perfection of character, and then in Tov that's explaining how we get there.
Yeah, but in Chubi says the reason why we get there is because that king is going to be this spiritual leader.
He's not hinting at that when he says so much about Chubi?
Maybe. Okay. But I would have expected that in the halachas about Mashiach, you tell us this important thing about the person Mashiach. Hello, why isn't it Shlomo and the greatest prophets as Moshe? So it's not something you should just gloss over. In other words, first of all, I do see that as a contradiction. I hear what you're saying. But I'm saying also it should be somewhere in these two prakim, and I'm going to show you somewhere he says explicitly the opposite. Okay, this is in Perikid Aleph Halacha Gimel. Let's read this inside. This is sort of what we're up to, if we're going straight. Al yalla al daitcha she'amelech Mashiach tzarich lasses oisim moifsim chadash nabal l'chaim beisim chayesu do v'shativ shemaim. Ain't another king. Don't think Mashiach has to do oisim moifsim and can do new things in the world or resurrect the dead or these kinds of things that tip. Ain't another king. Sharei. Rabbi Akiva chacham gadol mechach me'amishnah. V'hu haya noisei kelev shel kuziva hamelech. V'hu haya omer lo shua melech Mashiach. V'dima hu v'koch hamidei shua melech Mashiach hasheneg ba'avodas. Kim shenerag anoida shein Mashiach v'lo shalom menachem lo ois lo moifus. V'ikar dvarim kachu kachein she'atorah zeh sin chukem sh'zeh mishtan b'loim lo v'lom ve'im lo sikon aleim v'lo grei mehen. Chalam moisef v'gora oi shegil upon Torah tzadom shemitzim b'shnoiz v'valei rosh ha'pikoris. V'im yam bin melech v'izdav l'hag b'Torah v'izim mitzvah david avik p'Torah sh'chasam Sofer. The Yaakov is a little chazak b'Torah. Yilach mecham s'Hashem v'izim b'chesed sh'Mashiach. Ma'asav v'tzliach v'nitzach kol. Ha'umesh shesiva b'nei mikdash kol mitzvah v'chesed v'izim Mashiach b'vadai. L'tzliach had kohen nev v'dush yezeh sh'fir d'ver kol mefil v'shalem b'shem shem b'yisu. Nu, this guy's a Navi Gadol, Chacham Gadol Yasem Yishleim and a Navi Karvi Moshe. No, he's not. He's not. He's a Bar Kochba who succeeded. Had Ben Kaziva succeeded in doing what? Winning the wars, building the Mikdash, and gathering the Jews. Harei Mashiach b'vadai. This is a contradiction. Because I would think that if someone's a Chacham Yasem Yishleima and a Navi Karvi Moshe, I think we could know that. And to say, basically Rambam says, don't think the Mashiach is doing anything new. Because Rabbi Akiva considered Bar Kochba to be Mashiach. Dima, Omar, Shuha Mashiach. Who you understand about the Mashiach?
The only thing that's missing is that here
and had it succeeded.
Genius,
right.
In both Malachim and Shuba, he says, here he says too, he's going to push everybody in the ways of the Torah and uphold the mitzvahs. He's going to be a David of it.
Wait, what does he say?
He says that in Halacha Dalet and Malachim Chomis.
Yeah, Yaakov.
How you Torah about Isaac mitzvahs David of it?
Yeah.
Yaakov follows the law. I mean,
yeah, he's an executive branch. He says this is the law. He's a king. Not that he's going to teach something new. He's not teaching anything new. He's not coming with a new teaching.
And in Shuba, where do you read that he's teaching something new?
Well, he's Beloved Hashem.
You're Hashem.
Yeah.
That's the Torah, no?
Ah. Yeah, you think so? Yelamed Kol Ha'am. The Yorah is in Derech Hashem. Yavoyu Kol HaGoyim L'Shamai. Sounds like he has a new teaching that's going to be very compelling and very interesting, not only to the people but also to all the nations of the world. It's going to be some content. Here, there's no new content. In fact, the Rambam starts off with this whole idea that Torah doesn't change, which is not so clear where that comes in. But it's very important. He's being very conservative about Mashiach over here. He's saying there's nothing new to do. Everything's done already. Don't expect Mashiach to bring usher in a new world. We're not looking for a new world. The Torah is done. The law is done. All we need is someone to put the Torah into practice. But in the practice, you have to be an effective king, and you have to be Davidic, and so on and so forth.
And you don't see the statement that Torah is not going to change as sort of underscoring the fact that it's going to be a Torah. There's not going to be something new. That's going to be a new flavor of ice cream that's going to change the whole world. No, it's going to be Torah. Torah is Torah. It's not changing.
Right.
How much Malach?
Right. One second, but that's a different kivun than Cheshuva, where someone's going to come with some some new. At least he's gonna write a book.
I don't think
At least he's gonna write a book. It'll be another book to Tanakh. Watch that. If he's wiser than Shlomo and a Navi like Moshe, I'd like to at least read his book. Here, there's nothing. You don't have to read his book. He's a nobody. He can be Bar Kochba as far as we're concerned. Who, as far as we know, I'm not trying to ask from history. As far as you know, Kochba wasn't someone who's contended to be Chacham more than Shlomo. But the Rambam doesn't say he has to be anything special. He has to be a king from David.
Wait,
and if he does it successfully, he's done. He did it.
But in Tshuva, he's talking about being a king, or they're just going to have those people as part of our leaders in our
No,
society?
that king, Oisa Melech. Oisa Melech. Pentas basically says Oisa Melech Sheyamid Beis David. There's another Yamid. Right? Does it say Oisa Melech Sheyamid?
Yeah, it does.
Oisa Melech Sheyamid Beis David is going to be so wise. Wiser than Shlomo, the wisest man around.
Tshuva seems to be a very different class. The last department of Malachim seems to be connected the guy.
Oh, can I get the guy? Why can I get the guy? Why?
You're not going to change the title. I mean, not.
Oh, okay, so it's mafkia then.
He's
Okay.
mafkia. Everything is vis-a-vis them.
Interesting.
So I don't have to be the wisest or anything. That's for us. That I'm telling you what's going to happen.
I'm understanding answering the question.
For the guy, I'm just answering why you guys aren't in.
Well, I'm just answering.
Why you guys aren't in.
Okay, that is the agenda here. It's true,
That's
right?
definitely some.
The agenda is to
be
mafkia the false messiahs, right? Which he then gets to the end of the paragraph. Well, if Yeshua and Muhammad, he had a point. There was a purpose to that, whatever, right?
Right.
Part of Hashem's plan, right?
You can say Tshuva is the unadulterated.
Truth is for
Tshuva
us.
is for us.
Truth is for us.
Talks
This
more
is what's going to happen.
specifics.
This is what's going to happen for us. It's not.
Okay, but
the
he does say that as long as he succeeds, he's Mashiach B'vadai. He doesn't say he has to be anything special. Okay, I guess you could say it's not a contradiction because maybe you think he won't succeed unless he's that special thing, which is maybe true. Saying how would someone succeed at doing that unless he's a very special person?
No, I think it's still a kasha because you could draw an inference from Rabbi Akiva.
No,
Like,
right.
Rabbi Akiva
Exactly.
is not saying, "Well, this guy is not Elon Musk. We don't
Right.
have to," or whatever.
It's not even you know.
Right, like, why otherwise would Rabbi Akiva have thought he's a cheskas?
Right, exactly. Right, and the Rambam has a rule. Yeah, if there's a king from Beis David, Hagim and Torah, and fighting wars, he's B'ches Mashiach. Why is B'ches Mashiach? He's a random king.
Should be superstar.
Yeah, he doesn't say it's to be a superstar, to be Cheskas Mashiach, right? Even if you say, no, maybe Bar Kochba was that level. But the Rambam says, the criteria to be Cheskas Mashiach are Davidic, learning Torah and Isaac mitzvahs like David, which I don't think means like David. It means he's from, he keeps to the Torah and he does the mitzvahs. And he says that the Torah is the law of the land, and he wages wars. Right? That's Cheskas Mashiach. Gets around as a very minimalist Mashiach. That's his whole thrust over here, which goes against what is. Basically, once you see this, I think it's very clear he deliberately left that out of here. He says it's true, and there's a reason why. This most interesting thing about Mashiach, to me, the most interesting thing that is Navi Chacham more than Shlomo is not an Elvis Malachim. It actually cannot be an Elvis Malachim. It's actually contradictory. I want to understand why. What's the answer? But meaning, I'm just pointing out another point. Just the very fact that the Rambam throws that into this truth is a very remarkable fact. It's interesting. Like, why is that here, not here? Well, it's not here because it's actually contradicted by here, okay? So to answer and say, oh, maybe we can make a shtim, first of all, I don't think it's true. And second of all, the Rambam didn't put it here where it belongs. So that tells us that actually it can't be here, and he actually contradicts it.
If he doesn't put it where it belongs, how big could it be?
It's not. So let's get to it. So what's the answer? Let's get to the answer.
He says even less.
In the Ikr?
He says even less.
In the Ikr itself, but in the Hakadoma, it's not a lot. Here he doesn't say that either, though, that he's going to be a Chacham.
Here he just says that he's going to be Mizar David,
Right.
Mizar Shlomo.
Correct.
That's it.
Right. If you look at the Hakadoma to Chiyah, he talks more about him, but he doesn't say that he's going to be a Navi close to Moshe. He doesn't say that.
Where's what he's saying? How Yeshua is saying this is what we dream for. This is what we hope for. It's not necessarily what's going to happen. Right? They say, "Sabu call Yeshua." This is what we wish. This is like the ultimate.
No, Lefi Shet. We hope for Yemais Mashiach because that's what's going to happen. Because that's what's going to happen. That's what it means. That's what Yemais Mashiach means. Okay, let me tell you what's going on over here. Okay, let me tell you what's going on over here. It's crazy. Let's read Halacha Gimel again. Al Yalla Adayt Chashem Melech Mashiach Tzarech Laslis Moivsim. This is Perek Yadav Halacha Yom Tzmalach. Don't think Melech Mashiach Tzarech Laslis Moivsim Chaz Shem for Elam Tayim basically. It's a very Mishneh Torah. In a Davar Kain. Shaharei. Rabbi Akiva Chacham Godel Mechach Mishneh. And he was the weapons bearer of Ben Kazim and said he was Mashiach. What's going on over here with the Rambam's Haskama on Rabbi Akiva? I'm giving Haskama to Rabbi Akiva here. Why is he doing that? We don't know Rabbi Akiva is a great man. So my answer is going to be, I'll explore a little more, that if you're looking for your Solomonic or Mosaic figure, yeah, it's Rabbi Akiva. You're looking for a Chacham Yasser Mishleima and a Navi Gadol Moshe, you have a Chacham Gadol. Mentioned right here in the context of Mashiach. And what's that? Right. Was Bar Kochba, by the way? I'll go. Wait, let's see. Bar Kochba was the Mashiach. No, I'm not saying he was Mashiach. So then, firstly, let's talk about this a little bit. Putting Rabbi Akiva in the league of Moshe and Shlomo. You know who does this? Yeah, where?
In
Aleph Lamed
or Aleph Lamed or Aleph Lamed base?
Moshe and Shlomo? Yeah.
Sorry, Nun Test, excuse me. No.
Rabbi Akiva doesn't figure it out. Aleph Test is about Moshe and Shlomo, who makes him so great. Then Rabbi Akiva is the greatest Shlomo Anushis and Aleph, right? Aleph Test is about if everything you need to know about God is what He isn't. What makes someone Moshe or Shlomo? And if everyone knows that God isn't X, Y, Z. So then he explains how there's levels in negative theology. In Aleph Lamed, Rabbi Akiva is held up as the paragon of humanity. Shlomo Anushis is Rabbi Akiva. So yes, Rabbi Akiva is up there. But in Chazal, they put Rabbi Akiva up there with Moshe and Shlomo. For example, the Gemara Menachos that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemayim and saw Rabbi Akiva, and he saw Hashem making the crowns, what he did this for Rabbi Akiva. There's a Gemara, I think that Gemara actually even says it, that Moshe said to Hashem, you're going to have such a person in your world and you're giving the Torah through me. And Hashem said, Shtoik kach al machshav. Now, I wanted to comment on that Gemara. What's going on in that Gemara? There's another Gemara in Sanhedrin that says Ezra, that the Torah should have been given through him, but Moshe came first. So like, okay, yeah, Ezra was great. He could have been the lawgiver, but Moshe came first. So when the Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva asked, you should have done it, when Moshe said you should have done it through Rabbi Akiva, that means he's greater than Rabbi Akiva, right? He's greater than Moshe. It would have been different. The Torah would have been different. Which Chazal say also, so there's this notion that Rabbi Akiva is in a way greater than Rabbi Akiva, the Moshe Rabbeinu, and reveals new things. That's all explicit in Chazal. That he's up there with Shlomo is also explicit in Chazal, in the measures in Chukas, about Shlomo not knowing the reason for Paraduma, and Akiva did, Moshe did. In that measures, we have look at the beginning of Chukas, you see Moshe, Shlomo, and Akiva. Moshe knew the reason for Parah, but Shlomo didn't. Akiva did, because things that weren't revealed to Moshe were revealed to Akiva Ein Sham. So this business of putting Rabbi Akiva up there with Moshe and Shlomo is well attested to. Okay. So now, I submit to you that the Rambam here, first of all, the Messianic figure that we're waiting for when we start learning Mishneh Torah and we learn Halacha Tshuva, we say, okay, one the day is going to come where we're going to have tremendous prophecy and wisdom, is actually achieved in the figure of Rabbi Akiva, number one. And also that, okay, that's one point, we'll feel this person. But also, I want you to realize that the fact that the Rambam mentions that Rabbi Akiva was a Chacham Gadol Mechachmei HaMishnah is very appropriate. Why? It's very appropriate here in the Chasimah to Mishneh Torah. Because given that the Mishneh Torah is the Kabetz of Torah Sheba'al Peh, as the Rambam calls it, and Kulu Alimud Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva is the father of Torah Sheba'al Peh. So it's very appropriate that the Chasimah of Mishneh Torah should have this Haskama on Rabbi Akiva. Okay? No? Slow down. Why not? Bifurcate what? The Messianic role? Or what? Which one? Don't underestimate the power of Mashalim. Wait, see, we're getting to Mashalim. Okay?
What about the fact that he talks about Shei download in the future tense?
We're in Tshuva?
Yeah, Tshuva.
You're not at the end of Like Mishneh Torah. Sheyamid when you learn Mishneh Torah. We'll get there. And by the way, speaking of future tense in Tshuva, how do you translate this? I don't know how to translate it. David. Can you read it? Okay. Ba'chochma yiyah yesem yishleima will be a wiser person than Shleima. V'navi gadol hu karman. What does Navi gadol hu karman? Does it mean he is?
Yeah.
No, who just means he. There is no is. See, in Hebrew, you can skip the is. You skip the verb. Right. There's no verb there. We would translate that. Typically, we would translate that.
And the great Navi close to motion.
Yeah, but the who, right? But does the who make you say he is?
You're saying this who turned it into present tense.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, exactly. Right, if it wouldn't be who, then it would be Chacham Gadol Yiyah Yasser Mishleim, but Navi Gadol Yiyah, as if it says Yiyah, right? Or as if it's a Yiyah, carving nation. Okay, I don't know about that. Okay, so let's talk about this Rabbi Akiva. What's he doing here at the end of Malachim? So number one, I say, I told you I think Rabbi Akiva is this functioning as that who we're looking for. Holy horses on that, although maybe we'll end soon. We'll have to get back to this next time. Also submit to you that the Rambam wants to give us a skama to Rabbi Akiva here at the end of the Mishneh Torah. So he's mentioning Rabbi Akiva by name. You notice he doesn't mention people by name often in Mishneh Torah. He doesn't mention people by name. He wants to mention Rabbi Akiva's name here at the end of Mishneh Torah because this whole book that Rambam wrote, these 1,000 chapters, are essentially Rabbi Akiva's Kedushin. So it's important that he's mentioning by name. Now, let me show you where he doesn't mention him by name. Where he does not mention him by name. That's in Yesodei Torah Sof Perek Dalet. Yesodei Torah Sof Perek Dalet goes like this. The first 4 parakim of Yesodei Torah, the Rambam's summary, brief, touching on Ma'aser Bereishis and Ma'aser Merkava. And let's read the last halacha in Perek Dalet. Perek Dalet Yesodei Halacha Gimel. Vinyone arba prokim elu shebechamesh mitzvahs elu heim shacham rishonim koyvos et Pardes. K'mo she'amru arba nichasu lePardes. V'av pi shegedolei Yisrael hoyu acham gedolim hoyu loy kulam hoyu ben koyach leidel hasik al dorma boya. So Chacham talk about 4 people that went into Pardes, and even though they were gedolei Yisrael and Chacham gedolim, not all of them were able to know these things correctly. So here, they're all anonymous. You and I know that the one who was able to know right was Rabbi Akiva, who was Nichnas B'Shalom v'Yatzav B'Shalom. But the Rambam doesn't tell us who he was. He just says there were 4 Gedolei Yisrael, but not all of them were able to know. Well, let's read this Rambam first, and then we'll get back to Akiva. Vani Omer, she'ein roy l'tal b'Pardes elo mishchazal l'kreis elav mibasa. I say that you shouldn't stroll in the Pardes unless you fill your belly with meat and bread and meat. V'lechem mubasa zeh hu leid the beer house of amutak hetzvim hem sham mitzvahs. When I say lechem mubasa, I mean you should know what's aser mutar. V'ava b'shador meilu davar katan koyes chacham. Even though these things are davar katan, shemiyam chacham davar gadol ma'aser merkava tekona ma'aser barach. So why do I say that halacha should come first if the real important stuff is Ma'aser Merkava? Afa b'kein ru'in him like Kedimon shehein miyashvim daitish lodam tchil v'oid shein ateva kadosh shbiya first b'lish v'oid v'aver shein makol kadon donish yishapal le'brachom le'kotzel. Okay, so what Rambam is doing is like this. He started the sefer by saying really the most important thing is Das Hashem, to know that there's Hashem, and he's going to give us a few chapters about that, and then he's going to spend the next 996 chapters, maybe 994, because maybe the last 2 are getting back to it, so I'm arguing, talking about halacha. Why? Because you should know, yes, this is very important, but look, 4 people went to Pardes and not all of them were able to make it out. And I suggest then that you need to be miyashav daita shalom tchila before you could go into Pardes. So let's do that. So let's learn halacha. That's what he's going to do now for the rest of his sefer. And at the end of his sefer, you're going to find out who was the Chacham Gadol b'Chachmei Mishnah, who was the one who was Yatsa B'Shalom. So what I'm saying is like this, that the Rambam is telling us, through the Mishneh Torah and the structure of Mishneh Torah, he's actually telling us what made Rabbi Akiva is the fact that Rabbi Akiva is the one who is the father of Teresh Malpeh. Rabbi Akiva, as the father of Halacha, is the one who was able to be Yotze B'Shalom from Pardes, and the Rambam ends the Sefer with saying, "Amola Das Hashem." In other words, we're going to get back to Das Hashem. At the end of days, everyone's going to be busy with Das Hashem. That's the end of the Sefer. Which really, everyone should be busy with that forever, except that not everyone can do it. So we have to first do Halacha, but Halacha is necessary to bring us back to go full circle, and then say how to do Das Hashem. And Rabbi Akiva is the one who was ready to usher in that era, because Rabbi Akiva was Rabbi Akiva. Okay, see, roughly what I'm saying so far. I want to say one more point for now, and then we'll continue the solutions next time. What was Rabbi Akiva's big mile? This we'll look at the Gemara next time. But for next time, we should look at the Prakim, Aleph Lamed, and Lamed Aleph Lamed Beis. Those three Prakim, I think. Look at that. See, in Aleph Lamed, Beis. So this is 132, chapter 2, paragraph 2. Sorry. Volume 1, chapter 32, paragraph number 2, he says, if you stop where there's a doubt, and don't fool yourself to believe that there's proof for something that hasn't been proven, nor are you quick to reject, to negate something that hasn't been disproven, nor do you seek to know that which you can't know, then you have reached human perfection, and you are on the Madrega of Rabbi Akiva, who is Nichnas B'Shalom Yatsa B'Shalom. So what does it take? Why was Rabbi Akiva Nichnas B'Shalom Yatsa B'Shalom? Because he didn't assume something that he didn't know for sure, and didn't try to know what he cannot know. Now, there's a very big problem with this, which is that Rabbi Akiva. So this is, by the way, this is based on the Gemara that says Rabbi Akiva said Al Taimu Mayim Mayim. So when you go into practice, don't say Mayim Mayim. The first step means don't jump to conclusions. Don't assume something is the case unless you know for certain. That's one message over here. Rabbi Akiva assumed Bar Kochba's Mashiach. And to be shleimus anush, to be like Rabbi Akiva, is to not assume things that you don't know. So the Rambam's redemption of Rabbi Akiva's reputation in the Halacha Berged Aleph is not just happens to be Rabbi Akiva made this big error. Says the Rambam, no, it's not an error because you're supposed to assume Mashiach. It's getting to the heart of what makes Rabbi Akiva, what makes him so perfect. What gives him the ability to be the one that went into Pardes and comes out of Pardes is that he doesn't make assumptions. But isn't he making an assumption about Bar Kochba? Says the Rambam, no. Nothing's going to change until it's already done. We just need a person to do it, and there's a Chesed Mashiach, and Rabbi Akiva is doing everything right. So the Rambam's defense of Rabbi Akiva here is not just about a random thing that Rabbi Akiva seems to have made a mistake about, but it gets to the heart of what makes Rabbi Akiva perfect, and what makes Rabbi Akiva be able to be the one who is Nichnas B'Shalom Yatsa B'Shalom, which I submit to you the Rambam is doing here with the Mishneh Torah. Okay, so let's just review, because we're in the middle of something, but I want to stop here because it's just a lot. But what I said so far, what we said so far for today, the Chedushim were that, and this I know Tevi is not happy with. I think the Chiddush the Chiddush for now is that there's a different presentation of Mashiach in Echus Tshuva than in Echus Malachim. In Echus Tshuva, we're still looking for someone who's going to be wiser and shleim and not be like Moshe Rabbeinu. Once you learn through the whole Mishneh Torah, which is the wisdom of Rabbi Akiva, then you realize that actually we're there already. We have Teresh Malpeh. We have everything we need. The Torah is not going to change. And I further submit to you that when the Rambam says the Torah is never going to change, it means after Rabbi Akiva. Even though the Rambam always says the Torah never changes ever. But I want to read Halacha Perek Aleph as the Torah never changes. It means because you have Rabbi Akiva, you have Teresh Malpeh. After Teresh Malpeh is Chasam. The Torah is not changing. And the Mela, what does that mean the Torah is not changing? It means we have all the knowledge, all the wisdom we need. Now we just need someone to put it to execute it. So there's a difference between Mashiach as he's presented in the Tshuva and Mashiach as he's presented. So the difference is a lot of water under the bridge. Tshuva, you were just starting Mishneh Torah. Because Malachim, you came face to face with the great wisdom, which is Teresh Vapeh.
It's still available at the onset of writing of the Mishneh Torah.
What was available?
This ability the ability of the das that was needed through Rabbi Akiva.
Right.
It wasn't like it's happening in history. I mean, is there
right? I'm not saying
for in Mishneh Torah for other things that the Rambam doesn't sort of like lay out in a timeline.
So right. So there is and there isn't sort of yes. There's something interesting again about Mishal. The Rambam says in Hilchos Truva that right. The Rambam famously says Ein ben el mazal Moshe Mashiach el Shibud Malchus, and he also says that the Nevuos are not referring to Olam Haba. In other words, the Gemara Bracha says the following two things are contradiction. To say that the Nevi'im are talking about Yemos Mashiach and not Olam Haba, because Olam Haba is not something that the Nevi'im can know. Mm-hmm. That contradicts the opinion that says Ein ben el mazal Moshe Mashiach Shibud Malchus. That's the Gemara Bracha. Because if you say that Ein ben el mazal Moshe Mashiach Shibud Malchus, yet you have all these Nevi'im saying wondrous things, it must be the Nevi'im are talking about Olam Haba. The Rambam passes both of those. The Rambam says the Nevi'im are talking about Yemos Mashiach. They can't talk about Olam Haba. Nobody can know Olam Haba. The Rambam also says Ein ben el mazal Moshe Mashiach Shibud Malchus. It's true. Says Radbaz, the answer is the Rambam is going to tell us that everything's a mashal. And the Gemara says they contradict only because prima facie they contradict, on face value they contradict because if the Divrei Nevi'im are kipshuto, then they contradict. But really the Divrei Nevi'im are a mashal. However, says the Radbaz, the fact that and Wizram tells us it's a mashal, that's in the Solomonic last parak. Says Radbaz, but you can't know till you go through the whole Mishneh Torah, you can't know that it's a mashal. Learn the whole Mishneh Torah, then you're ready for this bombshell that things in the Nevi'im are mashalim. Even though the Rambam, by the way, starts parak aleph, which does also I know about Yad Hashem, but maybe this is there's a parallel. We'll get to this also further. There's a parallel between the project of not being Megashem Hashem, of the Bar Kochba, which tells us that everything about Hashem is a mashal, and the project of bringing us to Mashiach by telling us something about the mashal. Okay, I'll start with that. Okay, we're mamish in middle. I know we're in middle, but basically this is what I'm saying so far. That basically in order to get to Yemos Mashiach, we have to get to Das Hashem, which really is Pardes. That's the real Das Hashem. The Sefer starts with that, but acknowledges that not everyone's ready to jump in. The solution given in this Sefer is learn Halacha. That's what he says. It's like very Dalit. That's reading that in context of, look, there were 4 people who went to Pardes, but not all of them were able to make it out. Shalom. Go learn Halacha suggests that the one who was the author of the Mishneh, the main Chacham of the Mishneh, is the one who come out. That's supported by the fact that he's referenced as the Chacham of the Mishneh in the end of Mishneh Torah, which brings us into the Messianic era. And then furthermore, I say that the way the Rambam is presenting it in his Truva is faithful to the text. Back to Tevi's question, it's more to the text of the Nevi'im say that he's going to be this figure. He, the king from David, is going to be this figure. But what if Rabbi Akiva's teaching takes over the world? What if Teresh Vapeh becomes so developed that now this great wisdom is already the nachla of everyone, let's say? What if everyone has access to it? Then we no longer need that figure to have within himself this greatness of Shlomo and of Moshe. Because all he has to do is implement Rabbi Akiva's teaching. So in other words, it could split.
In that reading, you're reading her, Aleph, Lahazim Malchus based David. It's not.
No. Bar Kochba from David.
No, but Lahazim Malchus based David doesn't necessarily mean to bring back Malchus. The idea of Malchus. It's not specifically Malchus based David.
Well, no, I'm reading Malchus David literally as Malchus based David. I'm saying the Tshuva is not doesn't have to be literal.
It doesn't have to be literal.
Correct. It doesn't have to be literal. Once you dig a little deeper, you can find out that the Chachma and the Nevuah can reside elsewhere, and he has to follow it. Look, I mean, we're going to get to this more. We're going to dig down deeper in this, but the idea that Bar Kochba, the Rambam makes Bar Kochba was the weapons bearer of Akiva was the weapons bearer of Bar Kochba. Who's doing whose bidding? I mean, in a certain sense, Bar Kochba is doing Akiva's bidding. Who's the real king? So Akiva is the one who developed the law, and Bar Kochba was like, whatever you say, Akiva, just tell me what the halacha is, I'll do it. then Rabbi Akiva is the real king. And what I need to say is that then the Chochma and the Nevuah, that's Rabbi Akiva's Chedushim, okay, who cares whose Chedushim they are? I don't really care so much. Bar Kochba was there to put them into practice.
When you bifurcate this way, I want to understand now better what precedes what. Does the Chachma allow for the order, the structure of kingship, society, and then Mochaim Hashem, and then world peace?
Mm-hmm. Or, that's what I was suggesting, yeah.
Or does the, let's call it the order that's created by this king, which eventually turns into fighting wars of God, or peace, allow for people to witness the Chachma and then say, hey, there's something here, let's join in.
Right, okay. So that gets to the question I started with, which is like, what exactly is supposed to happen? Right, what's going to change?
What's the catalyst?
Right, what's the catalyst for kingship work?
Exactly. Some of them I'm trying to seem to say, once there's a king, there's no strife and no anything, you'll be able to attain this level.
Right.
Or you attain this level, now you have a great king.
I know.
Right. Because there's a huge war.
Right
in the middle of all of it. And then elsewhere he says there's a war.
So maybe a process. Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. So there's a process, different stages. Yeah, I'm not clear about that. The way I'm going now, and this we have a lot of work ahead of us, is that whatever Rabbi Akiva's big chiddush was, and that's what we're going to look at, Lamed, Lamed Aleph. So Aleph, Lamed Aleph, Lamed Beis, Lamed, Lamed Aleph, Lamed Beis. We'll focus on those next time. What Rabbi Akiva's perfection is and how that relates to Bar Kochba and what that new teaching is. What we have to figure out is why that teaching is the teaching that's necessary to facilitate a perfect kingship. Okay? So in other words, again, we have this problem about. I just want to point a little bit to where this things are maybe coming together. Because Malachim starts with this problem that didn't ask for a king l'kayim ha-mitzvah. Because Malachim is the end of the Halacha Sefer, and Halacha is the key to getting back to Das Hashem without going like Elisha ben Avuya ben Zim ben Azai. So, and that's what I'm saying. So Akiva's function as the Baal Halacha is the one who's going to allow for a kind of proper kingship. In other words, we have this problem about kingship, and maybe Halacha is the solution to that as well. Okay, Akiva's big teaching is a halacha, but also a different teaching about al taimu mayim, which is don't take the shalom literally. That's another thing that's happening. There's a bunch of different strands we opened up. The one thing I'm getting somewhere specific is that I maintain that Rabbi Akiva's appearance in Chalachim is there to replace the Chacham Gadol. So certainly it's relevant. Rambam says Narek Ba'avonis. Does that mean there was something imperfect about Rabbi Akiva?
No, because if you're saying you're building Rabbi Akiva up to, he's attained this level, but he was sure.
Yeah.
That means he wasn't wrong.
Right, exactly. No, but that's the point. He wasn't wrong because Rabbi Akiva's work is so done that now all we need is an executive. That's the point.
But then something went wrong with the executive.
Right, so Narek Ba'avonis, right.
Who's the Narek Ba'avonis? I thought it was Bar Kochba. The way you just said it for a second.
No, maybe Akiva was there.
No, I don't think that.
Well, it can't be Akiva.
I always read it as Bar Kochba. Kol Chachma Dereshim Malachim Mashiach Chat Narek Ba'avonis. It's got to be.
Yeah, Kiva Shanarek, Noid L'Shein Mashiach. He, Bar Kochba.
But what about the lack of...
No, so what are those Avonis? Those are interesting.
What about the lack of Rabbi Akiva's being enough? You're saying Rabbi Akiva's replacement for the Chacham.
Okay, so that is also Moshe. Chacham Adam Yudami. Don't know about that. So what's the problem with that?
All the references when Rambam says explicitly that Nevuah is gonna come back.
No, I think Nevuah will come back.
But that's not necessarily this.
No, that may be later.
Right.
This one of two people.
Correct. Could be later, right?
Okay. Last thing that before we forget is you said earlier that Rabbi Akiva in Mishneh Torah seems to indicate Rabbi Akiva's superpower is he's steeped in halacha,
right?
Whereas in the Torah he seems to say that his superpower is he doesn't
jump
to something.
Right. So apparently those two things maybe.
Is it the same thing?
Yeah, it must be the same thing because that's what he says. Look, and he said that Torah. He says that's what he prescribes for someone who wants to not to learn Pardes is to learn halacha. So yeah, and I mean. There is a big contradiction because in Learn the Meirah, it doesn't say anywhere you should make sure to have a good seder or Rashi Tosfos if you're on the Meirah. It doesn't say that nowhere in the Meirah.
I don't.
Yeah, exactly. Nowhere. And here he does say learn halacha.
Is the assumption that you've already finished yet?
No, but he talks about the thing is he talks about the pitfalls involved in Messianic and how to watch out for them. He doesn't say it.
He doesn't assume. Is the assumption that you've made it through the ad? If you're using that
question.
as this was a roadmap, so to speak, then the assumption is before you got to the Torah, you finished the ad.
Yeah, I mean, there's a way to know that. We have to search this because you can look through the Torah and there's things that he tells us, writes where they are, and things that he assumes that the Talmud knows.
He says,
so. He references it, right? He references it, but then he seems to be assuming that he's familiar with it. Yeah, he does seem like that. Yeah.
Because with the whole lot you know, culture by just reading this.
Then what? Then you should do it.
Then you get to the Torah.
Could be, right? It could be. Okay, so this is our work, basically. What's our work? Figure out we have the Gav and Mashiach. Again, you see how this also connects me a little bit to the Bilam Moshe difference because the little Nevi'im are busy with the person of Mashiach. The person as such gets a major downgrade in the Mishneh Torah from the beginning to the end. And you think about it, by the way, just maybe it's a little bit of a letdown. In other words, if you find this as a little bit of a letdown, that turns out Mashiach's not going to be this great superhero. It's because you're not such a chacham. Meaning, the idea that we need this figure, that's good for the Hamayim. What?
Isn't that the classic knock and rhyme misconception of Mashiach? It's just so normal.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. So, but look, the Rambam in the beginning does make it exciting. Huh?
He made it sound super.
Yeah, exactly. And we're gonna get back to this, but I'm gonna draw this line from the Nevi'im as opposed to the Torah that's rooted in the Nevi'im, who talk in Mishalim and don't necessarily know what they mean. He says the second days over here. So the whole Messianic idea is going to be presented in a way that actually maybe doesn't quite mean what it sounds like, because the idea of Mishalim is very important in this notion. And the idea of Mishalim, and all Nevuah is about this, and all Nevuah is about Mishalim. Okay, so we're groping in a lot of different things here, and I hope I'm gonna do a decent job. And also I want to ask you for your patience because it's a little different than we usually do. It's gonna be a lot along the line, just hearing things. I think it was more geschmack that I was learning it inside, but it's gonna be more like this.
Just a follow point on your point about